Welcome to the Church of Obelisk. Today we're going to talk about one of the most obscure and least well-known mechanics in Dota, but also a very important mechanic that is going to influence the way you play a lot of heroes. If you've been playing Dota for a while, you've certainly seen that, for example, siege creeps die really quickly to tower fire, but quite slowly to heroes or other creeps. You've seen, for example, if you play Lone Druid in those ancient times when that hero actually was good, you've seen that your bear does a lot of damage to buildings. And you might think this is just because there's a passive that gives it extra building damage, but that's not all there is to it. If you play Shadow Shaman, you've seen that your Serpent Wards deal a lot of damage to creeps, but they only tickle towers. And if you've played Shadow Shaman against Lone Druid or vice versa, you'll have seen that these wards, while they do very little damage to heroes, do a lot of damage to the bear. The mechanic behind all these phenomena is what we're going to talk about today, which is attack and armor types. Unfortunately, this mechanic is completely hidden from the player. There's nothing at all in the game that tells you that this mechanic even exists. And I've talked to people who've played Dota for years, who are like 4K, 5K people, who have never even heard of this. Now take a look at this table. This is basically the gist of this video. And in this table you can see the 4 attack types and the 3 armor types. All units in Dota that have an attack have one of these 4 attack types, and all units have one of these 3 armor types. And this table describes the interaction between these attack and armor types. So if, for example, if you have a unit that has a basic attack, it's going to do 100% damage against a target with basic armor, 70% against a target with fortified armor, and 75% against a target with hero armor. So what are these categories? Basic is the attack type that's used by melee lane creeps and by a lot of neutral creeps and summons. Pierce is used by ranged lane creeps and also many summons and neutral creeps. Siege is used exclusively by catapults and towers. And hero is used by heroes, as the name suggests, as well as many big creeps, as well as some summons. Then for the armor types, we have basic, which is used by most creeps and summons. Then we have fortified, which is used by buildings and catapults. And then we have hero, which is used by heroes, obviously, as well as by Roshan, by Visage's Familiars, and by Warlock's Golem. So now we can clear up the first mystery. Why do siege creeps die so quickly to tower shots? And for that matter, why do siege creeps do so much damage against towers and very little damage against everything else? That's because these two have both siege damage and fortified damage, meaning they do 250% damage to each other. And in addition, fortified armor is really strong against everything else. So fortified armor against heroes only takes 50% damage. So if you compare a catapult to a hero, the catapult gets 250% damage and the hero gets 50% damage. So basically for every point of damage that's displayed, the siege creep will do 5 times as much as a hero. And this table also shows why ranged creeps do so much more damage than melee creeps against creep waves. Well, first of all, because ranged creeps have just higher damage numbers, but also because they get a damage bonus. They get 50% extra damage against other creeps. Now, maybe you've noticed earlier that I used some rather Weasley language in describing these categories, these basic attack, pierce attack, and hero attack, and the basic armor type, hero armor type, and so on. Well, in a sane game, we'd have some sort of rule like melee creeps do basic attack and ranged creeps do piercing attack, and have that be consistent in some way, but this is Dota. There's going to be a million exceptions to every rule. And yes, most melee creeps you find in the jungle are going to do basic attacks, but there's many exceptions. First of all, there's a whole class of exception, and that's the big creeps. By big creeps, I mean the biggest creep that's in every large camp, as well as the biggest creep that's in every ancient camp, as well as with one extra exception, that is the little potato creep. That's the Hellbear in the Hellbear camp. But that's not where the exceptions end. There's also a couple of melee neutrals that just randomly have piercing attack, like for example the Giant Wolf, aka the Little Wolf from the Alpha Wolf camp. These little wolves just do piercing damage for no reason, and that's for example why if you try to jungle some sort of hero that has summons, like for example if you jungle with Enigma or Nature's Prophet and you want to have your summons tank, you notice that you take a lot of damage when you're doing these little wolf camps. These wolves do a surprising amount of damage, and that's because these little wolves have piercing damage. You can find a comprehensive list of all these neutral creeps and summons on Wikipedia. Link is down below. So I just have one word of caution. When I looked at this, I actually noticed a mistake. When I looked at this, the Beastmaster Bow still had the attack type piercing, which was changed all the way back in 720. I've since changed that. But just be aware, if this mistake is there, maybe there's other mistakes on this side as well, because occasionally the patches keep changing this stuff and sometimes it just gets overlooked. But for the most part, this list should be accurate. And here you can see that, for example, the summons are just all over the place. For example, if you look at Broodmother's Spiderlings and Spider Rides, the bigger spiders, the Spiderlings, have hero damage and the smaller ones have basic damage. But this doesn't really make sense because the Spiderling is still a really small creep, so this rule of large creeps getting hero damage doesn't really apply here. But it's just like one of these millions of exceptions that you just have to learn. Other exceptions here, like Enigma's Eidolons, for example, deal basic damage, which is rather unexpected, but that's the case, so that actually makes them really good at killing towers. So as you can see, another big exception is Lone Druid's Spirit Bear. So normally we'd expect the rule to be these big creeps get hero damage and maybe even hero armor, but the Spirit Bear is the most hero-like summon in the game, and yet it has basic attack and basic armor. And it really shapes the way that the Lone Druid Bear functions. It means that the Lone Druid Bear deals a lot of damage against buildings. As you hopefully recall, basic attacks do 70% damage against fortified, that is against buildings, whereas hero attacks only do 50%. So already that's a 40% advantage that the Spirit Bear has compared to heroes when attacking buildings. And basic attacks also only deal 75% damage against heroes, meaning the bear has a 25% disadvantage when attacking heroes. And on top of that, of course, the bear also has a passive that gives the extra damage against buildings. So the end result is that the Spirit Bear is really good at killing buildings, but not very good at dealing damage to heroes. Which is also part of the reason why Lone Druids typically go for damage items that are not just straight up right-click items. The most prominent, of course, is Radiance, which deals burn damage, and this damage is magical, doesn't care about attack types. So this is the way that Lone Druid can still do normal damage to heroes without facing this penalty of this unfavorable attack type. Another interesting exception is that both Necro units have piercing damage. You'd expect that from the Archer, but the melee Necro unit also has piercing damage. So Necro units are really good at clearing creep waves and creep camps, but pretty bad at hitting heroes and especially towers. Alright, I hope you found this video interesting and informative, and if you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Also subscribe to this channel for future videos. The next one I'm going to do is going to be on a game of No Tails, playing Chen in TI. I'm going to look at what you do as Chen if you've been thoroughly countered and your team is behind in the early game. Also invite you to look at my other channel, Libertas Europae, non-DotA related. There I produce educational content and video essays on European history and culture. So if that sort of stuff interests you, do come and check it out. Alright, thanks for watching. Until next time, may Obelisk protect you. Goodbye.